Hello everybody. A few questions that people had and what they wanted to learn was all about vehicles. So I dug out this book. This is called Wings, Wheels and Sails. All very important features of the things that get us from A to B. For example, a hot air balloon, a super fast jet, a huge truck, an enormous ship, or a small sailing boat. And don't forget the helicopters and the motorbikes. There's a lot of information in this book, so we're not going to read every single part, but there's some parts that are very, very interesting. For example, do you know how an aeroplane stays up in the air? Well, nor did I. And I have talked about this many, many times with my brother, who is a pilot. He might one day take you on holiday when we can all go off in an aeroplane again, because he works for the holiday company TUI. And he has tried many times to explain a diagram like this. You might recognise this aeroplane. This is one of the red arrows. Now, the red arrow doesn't have anything that goes round like a propeller. We were talking about propellers in our Zoom call this afternoon, but it has engines, and the engines force the aeroplane to go forwards. And they often do this to start with when they're on the ground, don't they? Because they have to move into position to get to the runway. But then they turn their engines up to max and the plane zooms along. While the plane is zooming along, the wings are a very special shape. And that causes the air to be pushed up to give the aeroplane lift. So while the engines are blasting the plane forward, the air coming up and over the plane's wings causes it to go up in the sky. So as it moves through the air, a force is called drag tries to slow the aeroplane down, which is why the engines need to go even faster, and the plane's weight also pushes it down to the ground. But as long as the force pushing it forward and the air flowing over the wings causing it to go up, the plane will take off, which is amazing. Now, has anybody seen a plane like that? This is called a glider. And my Uncle Alan used to, drive, that's not the right word, fly these kinds of aeroplanes. Now, these aeroplanes do not have any engines in them at all. So unlike the red arrows that is forced forward and the air causes it to lift up, these have to be pulled by a different aeroplane, pulled up into the sky, and then once they're high enough up, they can float because they've got these really, really long wings. So in the same way that the wings of a red arrow, as the air moves over them, causes it to lift up, this glider, because it's got even longer wings, can stay up in the air as long as it's been given almost like a push start, a bit like you at the top of the hill on your bike. Now, helicopters are a little bit different, aren't they? They don't have wings. They don't have thrust engines either that cause it to blast forward, because a helicopter's different. A helicopter can go up. And the reason it can go up is because of these rotor blades. Now, these blades are not nice and flat. They're not like pieces of paper that we could strip out. No. They are a very special shape, and they're also angled a little bit like the propellers that you might have seen in a fan going round and round on your ceiling, or maybe you got a fan heater at home. Let's read what it said. How do rotors work? Upwards, each rotor blade is angled a little bit more sharply on one side. Forwards, the spinning rotor blades are tilted slightly forwards. The backwards rotor blades are tilted slightly backwards, and sideways the spinning blades are tilted to the left or the right. So they're all different angles like this, and this to make sure they're pushing the air in the right way. And as they go round and round and round, they start pushing the air and it causes lift. In the same way that the red arrows plane has that forward thrust and the air coming up over the wings causes it to lift up. All of those rotor blades are special shapes, causing it to lift up. And this allows helicopters to hover in mid-air. They can fly in any directions, side, forward, even backwards. Helicopter pilots control their aircraft by changing the angles that the propellers are, so they can move them around, and that's what causes them to drive. Because it's not like a car's on a wheel, wheels on a car where you turn the steering wheel and the wheels turn. The helicopter needs to alter their blades. Look at this amazing helicopter. It's coloured yellow. That signifies a rescue helicopter, and that's just what's happening. One of the specially trained rescue men are going down on a rope to rescue somebody from the sea, which is amazing. You couldn't use an aeroplane to do that job. You need a helicopter to hover just above the sea. Now, a hot air balloon. Now it's different again, isn't it? Does it have wings? No. Does it have propellers that go round and round? No, but it does have this really cleverly shaped bit of material that comes up here. And it is very, very cleverly shaped because right here in the basket there is a big blast kind of furnace like an engine which causes lots of hot air to be pumped up inside this special bit of material. Now we know from our scientists that hot air rises. So if you have a kettle that's steaming or a pan of boiling water, the water vapour will often head up because it is hotter than all the rest of the air around it. Now as this fills with hot air, it suddenly starts to pull, and if you to see a hot air balloon about to take off, you can see it pulling and pulling and pulling until eventually the lift from the hot air, remember we've spoken about that word before, the lift from the hot air is causing it to pull so much that it can pull up the basket and anybody that's actually inside. Some balloons are filled with gas such as helium, and that also helps them to lift up because helium is a gas that is lighter than air, so it always wants to go up. A long time ago, we used to have a lot of these in our sky. These are called airships, and they worked on the same principle as a hot air balloon. But unfortunately, a long time ago, they didn't know as much as we know now about special kinds of gas, and they filled their hot air balloon, these big airships, with a gas called hydrogen that was highly flammable, so there were a lot of explosions, and the whole of this could go up in just a matter of minutes, causing the people who are all in this part here, they would go plummeting to the ground. So they were very, very dangerous. So we only see them these days if they're using a very special gas inside that is not going to explode. Now, cars. If you've watched one of the videos attached to this activity, you'll already know this. But the very first cars looked very different to what we have today. Have a look at this. They all have wheels, but some of them have wooden wheels. Some of them have big wheels and small wheels. Some of them didn't even have a cab yet to sit outside. But as we got better at designing cars, they started to look a little bit more like what we know them to look like today. They have a steering wheel and seats, there's a cover to keep you dry and a windscreen. And this bit under here was the engine. And the engine is what makes a car go. Now inside an engine, it needs some very special bits. It needs something to create a little explosion. Yeah, we heard that in our airship, explosions are not good, but in a car, you do need a little explosion because we put fuel into our car, and this fuel can burn very, very fast. And inside a car's engine, it uses the fuel and actually sets it on fire, causes a little explosion, and the engine uses that explosion to create power, to move pistons in the car, which allows the car to push the wheels around and around. But unfortunately, these explosions cause a little bit of smoke and a bit of horrible gas to come out, and that comes out in our exhaust pipes that you may have noticed on the back of your car. Now, cars these days don't look like that. They've become much more streamlined, much more efficient, and even some of our engines don't need a fuel to cause an explosion. They work with electricity. And that is made by powering up a battery. And then we use that energy in the battery to cause those pistons to move, which then drives the wheels. We make them in special factories like this. where there might be people helping control these bits of equipment, these special robots, but they make car after car after car. Now here you can see it's the chassis, it's the actual body of the car. And as it goes further down the line, it'll get the engine put in and the wheels put on and the chairs to go in for you to sit at and to make sure that they are comfortable. Now, there are also those racing cars, aren't there? Look at those. Over time, racing cars have changed their shape just the same way as the cars that we use on our roads. They've become lower to the ground because that means that they don't have the air pushing against it. If they're lower, they're streamlined, and it means they can go really fast. So they're often very smoothly shaped so that they can go as fast as possible. The first racing cars were the same as the cars. They didn't have cabs. There was nothing to protect the driver. And actually, if you look at Formula 1 cars, the really fast cars that go round and round and round the track that Lewis Hamilton drives, actually, he doesn't really have a big cab either. He has what's called a halo that goes round his head to protect him if he's in a crash. So they're still changing even now. Now, we don't just have cars on our road, we have lorries. Now, lorries have enormous engines because they often have a really, really heavy load to carry. And those engines are extremely powerful, but they need to have really big explosions because they've got to move huge pistons. So the engines need to be bigger, the pistons need to be bigger, and the little explosion that happens inside the bonnet needs to be bigger too. In America, they have big lorries called road trains. Look at that. It has a big lorry in the front and then it has lots of little lorries attached down the side. We can't have those in this country because our roads have too many bends in them. But in America, they have really straight roads. So the road trains just need something to heave it from the front and then they just follow on behind. Not to say that they don't use trains as well in America. But that is how they get things across their country really, really fast. Now this picture up here, this is a wagon. And that's what they used to use before they had big lorries. What do you think would pull that wagon? Would it be an engine like this? Or would it be something else that gave it power? If you watch the video, you'll already know this. They used horses. And that's where the word horsepower comes from. One horse can pull a small little carriage or a wagon. If you put 2 horses, it can pull something that's even heavier than that. Maybe it's bigger, maybe it's wider, maybe it holds more things. 3 horses will pull even more. 4 horses will pull even more than that. So we often talk about a car, how many horsepower does it have? And that literally translates as to how many horses you would need to drive it as fast as your daddy or mummy's car, which is very interesting, I think. And of course, we don't just have vehicles with 4 wheels, we have motorbikes too. And they work in the same way, except their engine isn't in the front. Their engine tends to be in this bit here, between the wheels. And they can go very fast indeed. You've got to be a very good driver to drive a motorbike. Now, trains. We've mentioned a road train, but we've not talked about trains. Look at this. This was one of the first trains ever built. It's called Stephenson's Locomotion. And doesn't it look strange? This was the first steam engine. And that is what powered most engines when we first started building them. It wasn't petrol or diesel. It was water. And it was water made to boil. So you had to have a fire somewhere to heat the water, to cause it to boil, like what mummy or daddy does on the cooker to cook your pasta. It needs boiling water, and when boiling water boils, you'll see puffs of vapour come off it. It's a gas, and it always wants to go up. Well, these engines captured that gas, and they used it to push the pistons that we talked about before. So it's not an explosion that pushed them. It was the power of the steam building up, and the pressure got bigger and bigger until it started to try and force its way out, and in doing so, it started to make things to move. Now, we moved quite quickly on from engines like this. Look at that. That's the Mallard, and if you've been to the Railway Museum in York, you will have seen this engine. He's amazing, isn't he? Look, he's getting a nice streamlined front, but the same thing happened. Inside he had a fire burning that was heating water, producing steam that pushed against the pistons and caused the wheels to move. And the Mallard was the fastest steam engine that we've ever had. Now we have all sorts of amazing trains. Some of them use magnets, many of them use electric, and not many of them actually use fuel, diesel, and very few of them use steam. The only steam ones are the ones that we used to use long, long ago because we've worked out that we can build a better engine. Now, the trains that we use, trains help us up mountains. They help pull heavy loads up the mountains, and they have to go quite slowly because it can be very, very steep going up the hill. This is called a monorail. Mono means one. And it's only got one rail, so the train kind of sits over it. Instead of the two rails that we have in this country, which need two sets of wheels on both sides, a monorail kind of sits over the top of one rail. And they are often used in cities in America, where actually the monorail goes over all the buildings, which is quite clever, isn't it? In this country, in London and Glasgow, and I even think Manchester might have one, there's a railway that goes underground, and we call it the Underground or the Tube, and it's a train that's often powered by electric or diesel. Look at these enormous ships, aren't they huge? Now, ships originally had big sails and they used the power of the wind to push them along. But then we got really clever with our shipbuilding and we started to build propellers, a little bit like what was on a helicopter. And we use a steam engine or a petrol or a diesel engine these days to power the propeller to go round, and it pushes the boat forward in the water. But look, these were some of the first boats, aren't they amazing? This one almost has a tail like a scorpion. This is a magnificent tall ship that in the height of our navy days, when that was where all the battles were fought out at sea, they are what kept us safe. But we also have other kinds of boats. This is a paddle steamer. So it's got a steam engine and that turns this paddle and the paddles push you through the water, a bit like when you're swimming. Pull, 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 and the boat moves forward. What is the fastest boat? Look at that. Now this looks like it's got a jet engine, just like the aeroplanes that we talked about at the beginning of the book. Very dangerous to go in a very fast boat because it will take one big wave and you could be pushed over. It's quite dangerous. There's also such a thing as a hovercraft. Look at that! And it uses puffs of air to make it hover above something, and it means that it can go really, really fast, which is quite exciting. And of course, a submarine. Now a submarine's just like that boat. Can you see how it moves? Has a propeller that goes round and round at the back that's driven by an engine deep inside. But these are special vehicles that have got a very thick wall on them because people have to go deep, deep down. And when you go deep, deep down, the pressure of the water pushes in upon the sides of the boat, and it can be quite a dangerous place to be as well. So they have to have special protection from this pressure and a very strong engine to make sure they can go down and come up again. And that's the end of the book. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it answered a few questions as to how vehicles move. To recap, usually there's got to be some sort of power, and that might be from burning fuel, an explosion. It might be from boiling water to produce steam. Or in the case of our electric cars, it uses power from a battery to push things and move them, and that then translates to wheels moving round. Or if it's the case of a bus or a train, they're special wheels to move round as well, and then they can move forward. I hope you enjoy some of the activities attached to this video, and I hope it's answered a few questions that you might have about how vehicles move. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.